Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. One of the things that keeps getting reinforced to me as I work my way through The Hobbit this time is just how dense with information every paragraph, every sentence is. We're on the third episode of our close reading of The Hobbit, and we're only a few pages in still. And now we're just discussing the way in today's episode that Bilbo interacts with Gandalf and then the dwarves as they arrive at his house. And how much information we can glean, not just about Bilbo, but about the dwarves and about Gandalf and his plan to take somebody on this adventure. And the way this works out is beautiful and systematic. It shows that Gandalf knows Bilbo in a way that Bilbo could never imagine. And whether Gandalf knows Bilbo specifically that well because somehow he has information on him, or he just knows hobbits that well to know what Bilbo would end up doing in this situation. Or maybe he's just a Maiar and he's powerful and knowing in other ways. Let's dive into it and take a look at Bilbo and the arrival of the dwarves. So we pick up toward the end of Gandalf and Bilbo's conversation the first time they run into each other outside of Bilbo's house. And Bilbo begs his pardon and says, "I haven't asked for anything." And Gandalf says, "Well, yes, you have, twice now. My pardon, I give it to you. And in fact, I will go so far as to send you on this adventure." It's a very interesting and bold thing for Gandalf to do here. First, he plays with the words a little bit about how you haven't asked for anything, like we've discussed on the previous episode. But more interesting to me in this part is the fact that Gandalf tells Bilbo exactly what he's going to do. "I'm going to send you on this adventure." And then he says, "Very amusing for me, very good for you, and profitable too, very likely, if you ever get over it." And so there's some foreshadowing here, right? This idea that things will be beneficial to Bilbo in the long term. But Bilbo can't handle this. He says, "Sorry, I don't want any adventures. Thank you, not today. Good morning, but please come to tea anytime you like. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow. Goodbye." And you have to think that in this moment, he's stammering and just trying to get this crazy old man off his doorstep, no longer talking about adventures, at least not today, which seems accurate enough. But you should come back tomorrow for tea. And then he wonders, after he closes the door, why would he invite this guy back for tea? What is he even doing? He says to himself, "What on earth did I ask him to tea for?" And then he goes to the pantry and he had only just had breakfast, it says, but he thought a cake or two or a drink of something would do him good after his fright. And this is another interesting line. Every single one of these moments does something specific. There is no filler in this book, at least so far. Every line is important and gives us insight into the characters. We learn here, although it's been alluded to and kind of talked about a little bit, that food means comfort for Bilbo. Food is very important. This seems to be another Hobbit-like feature. This isn't just Bilbo here. Hobbits in general find comfort in food. We come to learn that they have multiple meals, more than we do every day. The Baggins, and I guess we could consider that also the purely acceptable Hobbit qualities about him, seem to be very clear here. The story goes on, and Gandalf, of course, is outside, and there's this interesting thing here. It says, "and laughing long but quiet." about the conversation they just had. This makes me feel like when a parent is laughing at a child for doing something silly yet expected, something so very them that the parent gets a certain joy out of seeing the purity of who that child is, who that person is. Gandalf comes across kind of like that in this context. Then we're told that he uses the spike on his staff to scratch a queer sign on the Hobbit's beautiful green front door. The spike on his staff, I'm not sure if that's the bottom of the staff that pokes into the ground a little bit. Probably not. Or if it's one of the features toward the top of the staff that it happens to have a spike that's able to do this. It's not described in detail here. But we do know that it is queer. It's strange. That's the use of the word in Tolkien's day. And it's also a little bit odd to us as the reader. Why would you carve on somebody's beautiful door? Wouldn't that ruin the door? Wouldn't Bilbo not like that? We're also given some insight here about Bilbo's resilience. The fact that he goes back into his home, eats a cake or two, and then begins to think that everything's going to be fine. He kind of talks himself out of the stress that he was in. And I think this is an early sign of his resilience. The story moves on, and of course, we're told the next day he's almost forgotten about Gandalf. It says he did not remember things very well unless he put them down on his engagement tablet, like this: Gandalf, tea, Wednesday. This is a very normal thing to do, to write notes and make a calendar for yourself. I think it's interesting here that we are specifically told that he did not remember things very well. This, I think, is probably part of his Took side and part of his struggles to be more like the other hobbits, who probably hold on to memories a lot better than he does. But there's just some speculation there. I think the main point in this is that he has to work to be organized. It doesn't necessarily come natural to him. Then we're told that just before tea time, there came a tremendous ring at the front door bell. And I think one of the things we have to remember about doorbells here is that this is most likely a physical bell that somebody rings. It's not pushing a button that sets off a mechanism that sounds bell-like, like most of our homes. This is probably a physical doorbell. And so the volume with which the bell can be rung is directly related to how hard the person is ringing the bell. And already from the beginning, the bell ringing is tremendous. Now, I think this tells us something. Well, first of all, I'm not sure it tells us that the bell ringing is louder than it would have been otherwise. I think what this is giving us insight to, and we're going to see this play out, is the way it makes Bilbo feel. It feels tremendous because it's unexpected. He had forgotten about Gandalf. And then the idea of Gandalf comes rushing back into his mind. Oh God, what did I do? I invited this strange old man to tea. He must be here. And so what is the very first thing he does? Well, he doesn't run to the door. He prepares a new kettle, a cup and saucer, an extra cake or two, and he makes sure that it looks like he was already prepared for his guest for tea. He's being very polite, and he's doing what a respectable hobbit would do. He expects that it's Gandalf, of course. He runs to the door. He says, "I am so sorry to keep you waiting," and then realizes it's a dwarf. And this is the first time we get a look at a dwarf. And I think what's most interesting about this dwarf, who we eventually learn is Dwalin, the first of the dwarves, so Dwalin is number 1 in order here, is that this dwarf has a blue beard tucked into a golden belt and very bright eyes under his dark green hood. He's colorful. This dwarf is described in a way where he might as well have been drawn in crayon. Bright, colorful primary and secondary colors, bright eyes under his hood. This character is something you would draw for children, or you might expect children to draw with their crayons. We're still firmly in the realm of fairy children's story here. Dwalin says, "At your service," and bows low, as the dwarves do. And Bilbo responds, "Bilbo Baggins at yours," politely. He's so surprised at this moment that he doesn't even know what else to do. And he says, I'm just about to take tea. Pray come and have some with me. And he's, again, defaulting to the Baggins side of his personality, the personality that is polite with strangers and not ready for adventures and not particularly great at thinking on his feet and just defaulting to what would be the socially acceptable thing to do here. And so Dwalin comes in and they meet. And he doesn't ask him anything like, why are you here? What is going on? Where's Gandalf? And we're told that they don't really sit down and talk for very long until the doorbell rings again. But not very long, as they had hardly reached the third cake. And I'm assuming these must be small cake like rounds or not even cupcake sized things that they are able to just kind of munch on. Otherwise, 3 pieces of cake should take you a good amount of time to get through, I would assume. That's a lot of cake. But he runs to the door and, of course, expects it to be Gandalf. It's not Gandalf. It is our second dwarf, Balin, at your service. And again, we hear this phrase, at your service. This is an old-timey kind of phrase, at least here in the US. I'm not sure if English speakers in other locations still use this phrase, but it is a politity, I would call it. I don't think that's even a real phrase or real word. Who knows? Maybe there's a word for that somewhere. I haven't looked it up. But it is the kind of thing you say when you are meeting somebody else that mostly comes across as a polite saying, but also kind of means like, well, if you have any questions or anything you need, let me know. I'm happy to help you out. That seems to be the point of that statement. And I've discussed this before. It's kind of like in the US saying, how are you doing? But you don't really expect somebody to follow up and dig into that any. I have a feeling when you say at your service, you also kind of generally don't expect anybody to take you up on your offer, but you'd be okay with it if they did. But before he said at your service, he said, I see they have begun to arrive already. And this is the thing that sets Bilbo off. They have begun to arrive already? How many of these dwarves are there? And why is Gandalf not here? What is going on? Now, the end of this paragraph says, he knew his duty and stuck to it, however painful he might have to go without. This idea that he was running out of food, or at least considering that he might be running out of cakes specifically for these 2 guests and maybe a Gandalf, that he might have to go without any more cakes for himself, was kind of a personal sacrifice for him. And again, we're seeing that this is not a character that goes on adventures. This is not a character who is used to things that are uncomfortable. I'm sure you can think of some people in your own lives that might fit this description. Now, they sit down and have tea together. And remember, Balin's the second one, and tea's okay, but he's asking for a little bit of beer if that's possible. But I don't really mind the cake and the tea if that's all you have, basically. And Bilbo responds, lots. He found himself answering to his surprise about how much seed cake you might have when requested. Again, trying to show that he is a prepared host, somebody who is ready for whatever comes its way in social contexts for hobbits. We also note here that it's described that he baked the cakes in the afternoon. He didn't purchase these cakes baked from somebody else. He didn't require somebody else to be his chef, although he was fairly well-to-do when it came to hobbits. He probably could have hired somebody. He baked them himself. Bilbo's the kind of person who, although he eats a lot, is also going to make his own meals. He enjoys food that much, even though he doesn't have to. We then find out that Balin and Dwalin are brothers. They're talking like old friends, actually old siblings, we're reminded here by the narrator. And this is our first hint that people with names that sound similar might be related in this world. That is something that you can come to expect. Now, whether they're direct siblings, father, son, mother, daughter, anything like that, we don't have any more details on that yet. But it's a very clever and simple way of letting us know that similar sounding names also can imply family relations. The doorbell rings again, and every time it rings. It's described as loud or louder than the previous time, which again points at Bilbo's perspective on what he feels when the bell rings. And he thinks to himself again, Gandalf for certain this time. But it's two more dwarves. This time, two show up. Not just one at a time, but two. They seem to be multiplying. We get descriptions of blue hoods, silver belts, and yellow beards. These are blonde dwarves. And each of them carries a bag of tools and a spade. They seem to be working class dwarves as well, but they are still given blue hoods and silver belts. They're very colorful. And Bilbo's initial response to them, "What can I do for you, my dwarves?" gives us a sense that maybe he's starting to get the hang of this. Killy and Filly show up. Clearly they are together. They are implied to be related, right? Because they have names that sound similar. We just learned about that. They bow, and then they say, "At your service." And Bilbo responds, "At yours and your families." He's being overly polite. This is the first time he's responded not sounding shocked, but with a prepared, typical response to that kind of statement. And it even tells us here, remembering his manners this time. Then they notice that Dwalin and Balin are there, and they say, "Let us join the throng." This is an interesting word. You wouldn't use the word throng to mean just a couple of people having tea. Bilbo notices this, and of course, Tolkien notices this as well. Remember, there's a focus on specific word use. Bilbo doesn't like the sound of it. And in order to deal with this, he thinks to himself, I really must sit down for a minute and collect my wits and have a drink. The same instinct he had when dismissing Gandalf. Like he has to make a point to pull himself together and to continue to focus on the Baggins side of his personality. So that's 4 dwarves, but you and I know that that's not where it ends. And we'll get to the others after this quick mid-break. Don't go anywhere. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable. And I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. All right, welcome to the middle of the show. We get to welcome some new patrons this week. Kronenblatt, or Blav, maybe. 2 T's can sometimes make the sound, I think. That becomes a thing, right? Or maybe I'm thinking 2 D's. And then Lucy, welcome to the Patreon. Correct me about your pronunciations if ever I get them overly terribly wrong, and you need to let me know. Also, we need to shout out our VIP patrons. Here we go. AK Music Lover, Apollo, Aragorn III, Alte Morton, Austin C, Azzle Razzle, Barney D, Bo, Black Squirrel, Brandy D, Cutter Metalworks, Daniel Nightweaver, David S, David M, Divine Madman, Fulcrum, Gimli a Break, Gemma D, Jesse P, Jezer, Katie S, Capenna, Lori B, Mason Weathertop, Michael M, Nick K, Nostrils of Sauron, Patrick W, Richard J, Rivqua, Rosie Rose, Sam B, Seju, TJT, and Tour Son of Whore. Thank you so much for all of your support. Holy moly, I got through that whole thing that time. And if you'd like to support the show in other ways, if you want to access bonus content or ad-free episodes or get t-shirts, which will be revised in the coming month or two, head over to patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast. Check everything out. And I'm even cooking up some ideas. I know I've been debating this whole playing video games with the community or getting into Lord of the Rings style games and those kinds of things. And I'm trying to stream more gameplay and just chat with the community more. So if you want to come join me, twitch.tv/robotsradio is the place to do it. I'm thinking about just kind of narrating a role-played playthrough of the quests in the Middle Earth MMO. What is the name of that? Oh, it just fell. Lord of the Rings Online. That's what it's called. So that might be a thing. And I might be streaming those, and I might be taking that content and putting it up somewhere so you can listen to it or watch along, even if you miss it. Maybe just for patrons. Any paying patron might get access to that. Let me know if you think that's a fun idea. We'll see. Also, if you'd like to support the show in other ways, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will get me to read out your words on a future episode. You can also rate the show on Spotify. You can share it with your friends. All of that stuff. Thank you for being a part of this community. All right, let's continue with the story. Here we go. So Bilbo sits down. He starts to try to collect himself and deal with the situation. And we hear that the dwarves start talking amongst themselves about a few things. Mines and gold and troubles with the goblins, all things that we might find typical of fairy tale dwarves and the kinds of things that they would deal with. Although I have to wonder, a reader in 1937, how much would they know about dwarves and the conflicts of dwarves with goblins? Maybe that is a new feature, something that many readers wouldn't necessarily assume about dwarves. And then we get the depredations of dragons. Depredations of dragons. Depredation feels like one of those SAT words or one of those college level words. I don't know if people spoke differently back then, but I know that I had to look up the specific meaning to get exactly what was being said here. Depredations means an act of attacking or plundering. This is our first hint of Smaug. The first time that we get a sense of where this story might be going in the long term. And it's a subtle little hint because this could be old fairy tales. This could be stories of things that happened long ago in faraway places. This isn't a faraway place, but it's not something that happened that long ago. And Bilbo didn't understand this, and then all of a sudden we get his bell ringing again. And in order to keep the story from getting too serious, we get a description of the way the bell sounds. Ding dong, a ling dang. It's quite an interesting. I expected ling dong or something like that, but it's ling dang. And you can tell Tolkien's remembering who his audience, or at least who he thinks his audience is, because he puts this in there. And we're told as if some naughty little hobbit boy was trying to pull the handle off. That is how the bell sounds. It's annoying. It's like a kid playing with it. And again, maybe we're getting insight into Bilbo's own mental perception of what it actually sounds like. Someone at the door, he said, blinking. He's kind of being pulled out of his stupor. Some 4, I should say, by the sound, said Philly. Besides, we saw them coming along behind us in the distance. This is another interesting thing here. Did the dwarves have better hearing than most other people? Can they tell how many people are standing out there? Or was Philly just saying by the sound, meaning it was a loud ringing, lots of ringing, so maybe it's a group of people for some reason, because maybe groups of people ring bells differently? Or it was really just he saw them in the distance, he knew there were 4 of them, and so he's just kind of showing off on being able to count them by the sound somehow. It's a weird statement, but we need to move on from that. So Bilbo puts his head in his hands. He's starting to lament that he's in this situation. And then the bell is rung again, louder than ever. And he runs to the door. And he finds that it's not just 4 more dwarves, again, multiplying the number, but 5. We're told of Nori, who's the 5th dwarf to show up, Dori, the 6th, Ori, the 7th, Owen, the 8th, and Glowin. And they have 2 purple hoods, a gray hood, a brown hood, and a white hood. We are getting a selection of all of these very normal yet distinct colors. The dwarves are, in a way, building a rainbow of colors as they show up and hang their coats and their hats on the pegs. And we're told that they have gold and silver belts. And at this point, I start to wonder, is the entire belt made out of gold or silver? Or is this like the buckle on the belt is gold and silver in order to add some definition, some bling to the outfits and make them seem a little more important? The same way that you would wear jewelry. Of course, they call for ale and for food, and Bilbo, being a good host, goes and gets things for them. And then we get something that's different. A loud knock. No longer the ringing of the bell, as if somebody was banging it with a stick. There's only one person that we've met so far that seems to carry a stick. Bilbo rushes up to the door. We're told that he realizes that this is the most awkward Wednesday he ever remembered. I think this is another one of those humorous moments. Why mention specifically Wednesday, like that has anything to do with the situation? And then we find 4 more dwarves and Gandalf, leaning on his staff and laughing. Gandalf finds this very humorous. And we're told that he made quite a dent on the beautiful door. He had also, by the way, knocked out the secret mark that he had put there the morning before. Now, in our modern day parlance, which is a strange phrase to say just to begin with, knocked out the secret mark would imply knocking it off the door, but I don't think that's really what is being said here. I think it's probably being like scratched out is more of what we would say today. But the fact that he dents the door is interesting. Gandalf doesn't really care if he messes up Bilbo's nice things. It's almost like Gandalf is implying early on in this story that the coveting of wealth is not important. In fact, it's a detriment often to doing the right things. And we know from reading this story, if unless this is spoilers for you and you're just for the first time incrementally going through it with me, that Smaug is coveting the dwarves' treasure and the dwarves want their treasure back. And that becomes a huge point later on in the story. And then we get this other line from Gandalf, which I find also very interesting. He says, carefully, he said, "It is not like you, Bilbo, to keep friends waiting on the mat and then open the door like a pop gun. Let me introduce," and then, of course, the next group of dwarves, Bifur, Bombur, Bifur's 10, Bombur's 11, or Bofur is 11, Bombur is 12, and especially Thorin, who is the 13th one. We have a total number of dwarves now, 13. That number should sound familiar for anybody who's learned about a certain Messiah with his 12 disciples. You see the similarities there? Important people bring an entourage of 12. And this is something that shows up in other places in history and myth as well. For example, some tellings of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table has 12 places for knights at the Round Table. Other tellings have 20. Other tellings have 150. It just depends on the story. But the idea that you would go specifically with 12 surrounding King Arthur as their leader and the promised coming king, that sort of thing, implies similarities to Jesus from the New Testament and, I guess you could say, Thorin and his entourage here. Then we get another "at your service" from Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur, who hang up their yellow hoods and a pale green one, and also a sky blue one with a long silver tassel. Interesting. This is the first time we've gotten a tassel described. And that one specifically is Thorin's. It marks Thorin, I guess you could say, as being different from the other dwarves. A very special feature that kind of singles him out. And then we find out that Thorin was not particularly excited about being knocked over when the door flew open like a pop gun, as Gandalf said, which is funny because you have to wonder, do dwarves have pop guns? Do they know what a gun even is? Or is that just for the reader? And he was not pleased at all. And Bilbo, of course, apologizes. Since he's being a good host, even if he's frustrated with all these guests showing up out of nowhere. And we get a sense of Thorin's personality here. He's haughty. He's expecting other people to kind of do what he says around him and treat him in a certain way. But he's not without forgiveness. He does grunt, "Pray don't mention it." And he stopped frowning. He lets it go. And I think this is an interesting character point so early in the story. Now, we're also told about Bombur and how immensely fat and heavy he is from the onset. This is Bombur's very specific condition. This is who he is. He is the fat and heavy one. And of course, that's included for comedic aspects, and it also makes Bombur kind of cute, you know? Like, oh, he's kind of roly-poly. He's kind of this fat and roly dwarf. So that's Bombur. Now we've got all of them together, and we get this paragraph from Gandalf. "Now we are all here," said Gandalf, looking at the row of 13 hoods, the best detachable party hoods, and his own hat hanging on the pegs. This does a few things. We're told here that Gandalf can count and that he can tell that all the other dwarves are there by the hoods that are hung on the wall. He doesn't actually have to see them in order to deduce what is going on in the situation. This is an aspect of Gandalf that we will become very familiar with. He is not the kind of person who has to see it in front of his eyes to know it to be true. He's the kind of person who can deduce situations by the context of the situation. It goes on and says, "Quite a merry gathering," Gandalf is saying. "I hope there is something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. What's that? Tea? No, thank you. A little red wine, I think, for me." And then we get responses from the dwarves, but I don't want to get into the responses at the very end of this episode. I want to focus on what Gandalf's actually doing here. Gandalf is not just asking for something to eat and drink because he's a weary traveler. He is keeping Bilbo busy. He's specifically planned for each of the dwarves to show up in this specific order. It starts with one, then another one, and then it doubles with two, and then it doubles again with four. The numbers are increasing in a way that Bilbo can learn to accept the situation that he's in. If they had shown up 13 people on his doorstep, he may have just slammed the door and sent them off. But instead, Gandalf is playing to the aspect of Bilbo's personality that is a good host, that is a good hobbit, that is a Baggins. And he's using that against him in a way in order to get what Gandalf wants, and what may ultimately be best for Bilbo, but Bilbo doesn't know it yet. And in order to carry this forward, in order to get Bilbo even more comfortable, even more invested in this group of guests, he's keeping Bilbo busy. He's getting him to bring more food and drink, to service these guests like a good host, in order to buy more time to eventually convince Bilbo to go on this adventure. It's all very intentional and planned out from the beginning by Gandalf himself. And if you look at the details like this, it becomes very clear. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining me on these close reads of The Hobbit. I'll be back next week with another episode. And continuing this week in the bonus episode for patrons, I'll be going over more of the Hobbit family names, and they're so cool. So I hope you come join me for that. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, The Elder Scrolls Lorecast, The Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord, or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.